Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Student Lounge for the National Institute for Genealogical Studies. My name is Gina Philibert Ortega, and today we have a very special guest. And before I introduce her and start her slideshow, I just want to remind everybody to mute yourselves and to turn off your video so that we have as much bandwidth as possible. And when we're done with the presentation, you want to ask Denise questions, then we can unmute and do all of that good stuff. So let me read her bio. Hold on just a second. I have to go between tabs here. So Denise Griggs is an author of books for children and young adults about genealogy, diversity, and theology. She earned her BA and MA degrees from a Christian university and has worked in both education and ministry. She has volunteered for over 30 years in children's ministry, family genealogy research, and teaching African American genealogy. She has researched the Griggs and Hunt families for over 40 years, and for the Hunt family back to 8th century England and Ireland. She's connected with DNA cousins in Ireland, Canada, England, and across the United States. Denise is a 2021 Phyllis Wheatley Award recipient from the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage and a 2022 finalist award recipient from the Next Generation Indie Book Award in the category of African American history and culture. She volunteers for the subcommittees of history and research, part of the PR marketing team for the Natchez U.S. Colored Troops Monument Committee, and a volunteer for the National Park Service. She has an ancestor who was a homesteader listed on the Black Homesteader webpage. Her latest book, and what we're here for, is A Mulatto Slave, The Events in the Life of Peter Hunt, 1844 to 1950. So I want to welcome Denise, and I am going to add your presentation. And there we go. Take it away, Denise.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And for those who are in attendance, I really appreciate it. This book has been a labor of love for a long time. And as every genealogist knows, you will uncover something else over the years. So if you want to go ahead and start, you can. Go ahead and do the sound.
It's on. Can people hear it? It's going in and out, so I don't know. Okay, Cheryl says she can.
Okay.
It sounds like it's working and then it's not working.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I'll just have to go ahead and share.
Okay.
If you'll just hang on a second. Okay. On the personal reflections here, I just wanted to say how I felt about all of this. Often historians do not consider oral family history as a reputable or reliable source. However, most times it is the only source for many African Americans. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. For example, my family's oral history led me to places where I obtained documents that cleared up misconceptions and confirm our history. Meeting others over the internet and local genealogy groups also enabled me to give and receive much needed information. In this book, I speak to the strength, courage, and tenacity of my ancestors who survived troubling and often perverse times in American history. Although enslaved, my family contributed much to the economic and political aspect in America and abroad. In this book, I give love, honor, respect, and appreciation to my ancestors who paid the price for my many freedoms. I am immensely proud to be one of their descendants. Next. It all began with one simple question. Auntie, who's the picture of that white man on your parlor wall? She started to tell me she didn't know much, but that he wasn't a white man. Little did she know that the little she knew would lead to so many clues to get me started on my genealogy research. Next. And the next slide. This slide shows all the clues that were found in what she said. And it was over 20. She knew his sister's name, that his name was Peter, and that he was a slave, much to my surprise. That he and his sister Margaret, they were the children of the slave owner, and their mother also a slave, but she was also a mulatto slave. There's so many things on here. When Margaret died, Auntie didn't know the parents' first names. All she knew was Hunt slaves. Peter finished raising the children. So this is my great auntie right here, Aunt Julia on the left, and to the right is her brother, which is my grandfather. And these are my grandparents, my mother's parents. Next. Most of my ancestry is from Mississippi, and the family surname I was looking for is Hunt. My ancestors were slaves in Amite, Adams, and Franklin counties until the emancipation in 1863. As rural farmers, they lived in the cities Kirby, Knoxville, Liberty, Meadville, Roxy, and Whiteapple. And all of those are important for me to enable me to trace my family history. And as I was tracing it, I also discovered other family names, and that's next. Also, I needed a map of Adams County, and you can see Franklin, Amite, and Adams, which is where Natchez is located, and it's the top arrow. To the right, where they first began, was in Amite County in a city named Liberty, which is ironic since they were enslaved in Liberty. Next. One thing that I discovered every genealogist needs, and there are several other maps, not just particular to your particular location. One of those resources is a map of the Native American tribes living in the Americas prior to the American Revolution. My grandfather said we had Indian heritage and it was Choctaw. And he also told us at the time he had Irish ancestry. So as you can see, the Choctaws lived in, they originally were in Georgia, and then in Mississippi, where the majority of them are located now, those who didn't go to Oklahoma. This is another map. It's called Paths of Diffusion of the Population. All genealogists need to know that the European settlers came to America when they immigrated here, but where did they land? Where did the majority of them land? And by this arrow, the Hunt family immigrated here and arrived in Georgia. So you can see where it's the English, the French, Scotch Irish, as well as the Irish. This is another map of the changes in the US from 1790 to 1900. Grandpa said his great-grandfather, the Indian, was named Smart. And I subsequently found him where he said he lived in Georgia. Well, his son, Deck, said that his father was born in Georgia, but Deck said he was born in Mississippi. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that Georgia encompassed all of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia as one state. And Deck was born about 1839 to 1840, and you'll see it in the bottom area that by this time, there were actual states of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Did he really move from Georgia to Mississippi, or did just the boundaries change? So that's one thing most genealogists need to know and need to see how their people traveled and what the United States was at that time. Next. Now, the Irish immigrant, his name was pronounced Fitzmaurice, even though it looks like Fitzmaurice. He was born in 1856, died in 1822. He was the beginning of my maternal family. He was born in County Tipperary, Ireland. He immigrated to Georgia. He became a soldier for the Americas in the American Revolution. His son, Henry Hunt, became a captain in the War of 1812 while stationed in the Mississippi Territory, and that's important for our family. Mississippi became a state in 1817, and Fitzmaurice relocated to Mississippi in 1821 after his wife died in 1815. Next. In researching Fitzmaurice's ancestry, I got a map to show me where County Tipperary, Ireland is, and it's there. And I discovered that he also was of English ancestry, where his family originally came from. The High Sheriff of Essex, Henry Hunt, married Jane de Vere, the great niece of the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere. And if anybody knows about the Oxfordian theory and Shakespeare theory, you can look that up. There's a big discussion about it for the last 200-300 years. Okay, next. Next slide. Also, I needed to know more about Fitz. I found his will after someone kind of intercepted my query and said, would someone please answer her so she'll stop asking questions? And I was okay with that. Fitzmaurice died in 1822 in Mississippi. And also there are church records. Where I have the asterisks, I found that Smart, he died in 1852. And also he was in Mississippi as well. And also there are other servants of Henry Hunt, namely Josh and Millie, that shows up in our family throughout the rest of the research. Next. Next slide. Also, there were slave sales. Shortly after Fitzmaurice died, his son Henry Hunt purchased a slave girl. She was 15. Her name was Mariah, and he purchased her for $450 in 1823. Also, there are slave mortgages. Henry Hunt borrowed a little over $3,000 in 1825, but he had to put his slaves up as collateral. And the names are there, and they're Smart. This is in 1825, and they were, several of them were from the estate of F.N. Hunt, which is Fitzmaurice. The thing about this is in 1830, those slaves, even though they're not listed by name, the ages reflect who they were up here in the actual mortgage, because he hadn't paid the loan off yet. Here's a slave ad that Henry Hunt took out in 1836. The note for the loan was due in February, and he paid it by whatever he sold in January, and he paid the loan in full in February of 1836. I wanted to show that in Mississippi Wills and Probate Records, this is for Henry Hunt. He died in 1870. But then in his will, he laments the loss of his property because of the war. And by his property, he meant the slaves. He was slave rich more than he was land rich. Next slide. Other resources that I use, most of you are familiar with these, like books, census records, deeds, marriage and divorce records, pensions, and slave sales. But I want to focus on a historical timeline, which is the Timetables of History. That's the book I purchased. But also to the left of the screen is a book by David Hunt. He's a doctor, a retired doctor in Australia, and we're distant cousins descended from Fitzmaurice and one of his brothers. The Slaves of Liberty helped me to find the name of the man who fathered the children, Eula, Abigail, and Abel, with my second great grandmother, and he was married, as Aunt Julie told me. But there's a blurb in here about him demanding to take these, he called them orphan slave children, which a lot of them did when they were in fact their own children by a slave. Canoeing Mississippi is a journalist, and he helped me understand the lay of the land. So what I did in my book is I made a historical timeline for Peter Hunt, beginning with when he was born and some of the world event histories like the gold rush in California, when Lincoln was shot, the end of the war, the original Juneteenth in Texas when they found out they had been free for over 2 years. And I have asterisks where there were the Black like inventions or anything that had to do with an African American. I put it in asterisks, and a lot of this information I got from the Detroit Library. They just felt really honored to be included in the book. So I have several pages until his death of things that happened, or the beginning of things like baseball leagues and baseball teams. Okay. All right, I wanted to put in here the Civil War. As I was studying about the Civil War, which I really didn't learn very much in high school about it, I saw that it was more an uncivil war. And so I wrote this poem that reflected how I felt. Between the sheets of black and white, gray and blue divide, ever spilt the red life force, the truth, a shared bloodline. Here we have Black slaves having children by white men. And those children became either the Confederates wearing gray or the Union wearing blue. And they were fighting over what? Was it actually their way of life? Was it slavery? Was it a war tactic? And in fact, the truth was, it was a shared bloodline that they were fighting against one another. This is the Emancipation Proclamation. Most people think that it has freed slaves across the United States, but it didn't. It was 11 states, the ones who seceded from the government, from the Union. Next. Next slide, please. This is the Civil War recruitment poster that when Frederick Douglass made a speech on March 2nd, 1863, he also had the poster telling them that they needed to join the army and help fight for their freedom. A year later, Peter Hunt, after he turned 18, he did enlist in 1864, the following January. And these are his cards. There are two different Peter Hunts that are erroneously in one file. So that was something to discover. Now, this 1865 Registry of Freedmen residing on the plantation of Henry Hunt, this is after emancipation. Here's Josh here. He's with America now, and they have 5 daughters. Peter wasn't on this document as he was in Natchez in 1865 as a soldier. And they list them by age and their color, like black, yellow, and copper colored, to show that they're mixed or mulatto. And the work that they did as a cook, a field hand. Many of them are dependents. Next date. Next slide. Part of these documents came from the pension file of Peter Hunt. The card to the upper left is where you have to get this particular information. You can get it off of ancestry.com as well so they can pull the pension. According to Peter, he said his mother told him that his father was old Captain Henry Hunt. You wouldn't dare ask before they decided to tell you. The description of Peter was that he was 5'10" and could readily pass as a white man. Also, this document in the center talks about his life, his wives, his child, in order to obtain it. I wanted to put the wives of Peter Hunt. Emily, it turns out, was the wife who helped Peter raise his sister's children. They were married for 25 years, and only one child, Albert Hunt, survived adulthood. His second wife was Alice Calvert. She was half his age, and they ended up divorcing. By this time, Peter was disabled from the measles he caught while in the service. His third wife is Rebecca Wilson. She was just about his age, and they had sort of the same background, but she wasn't a slave. Her father was white, and her mother was a mulatto as well. They separated when after 5 months of marriage, so after Peter died, she couldn't get his pension. And she was from a mixed race rural town that no longer exists in Mississippi. But I met her great niece in Crosby in 2019. Unfortunately, she has since died, but she gave me so much information. And my connection to the Wilsons is that Rebecca's brother is also how I'm in that family through her brother. So that was just a great, great meeting. Next slide. Now, in 1862, before emancipation, Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act of May 1862. It also went into effect January 1st, 1863. Of course, some blacks had problems, but in order to file for a homestead, they couldn't ask your race. It was available to both men and women, people who were going to become citizens, and they had to work the property for at least 5 years, live on it, and build on it. So whether it was a corn crib or a house or whatever, they had to do that and then file for the homestead after 5 years. Here is the information for where Peter claimed 157.38 acres of land, even though he only used 25 acres for farming. This land is still in his family, even though they didn't know about him. Peter's mother, America, also filed a homestead for 39 acres. And on this map of land and homesteads, I discovered John Reynolds. He was the father, the white father of my great grandmother and her siblings. And you can see from these little green people that he was, they all lived in the same area. Now, in 1907, just his white half brother, his name was HFM, and it stood for Henry Fitzmaurice Hunt. He verified Peter's date of birth. Peter thought it was January, but it was August. Where he was born, Peter thought it was Franklin County, but it was Amite County. And that he verified that his father, Henry Hunt, owned Peter's mother, and her name was America. Here's Peter Hunt's death certificate. It shows here that America is his mother and that his son was Albert Hunt, and he provided the information and where Peter was buried. It wasn't at the Natchez City Cemetery where it should be, but the rest of the soldiers. This is a listing of the United States colored troops, Civil War soldiers, and where to locate them on the war memorial. And it shows exactly where he is. This is a picture of when I first went to Washington, D.C. to see the actual memorial put together by Colin Powell and Dr. Frank Smith. And there's Peter Hunt's name. Even though there were two, the information showed me exactly which one to look at. Very emotional, very moving. I felt as if I was going to meet Peter and attend his funeral at the same time. Other family documents that are in my possession are the land and deeds for the estates of my great-great-grandfather, passed down to his children, one of which was my great-grandfather, and has now passed down to us since our mother passed. Also, their marriage and divorce records for Franklin County. This Peter was a witness for one of his sisters. And this is another copy of other information from his pension file. And it's over 30 pages in the pension files. This is the original picture of Peter Hunt that I inherited from Aunt Julia after her death in 1998. This is the original frame it was in. Unfortunately, the glass was broken. It was left in the house by itself, and the rain kind of messed up some of it. So for others, the call to action, these are some of the suggestions, especially for African Americans. Try and learn the background of your family through oral family history. It always points to the documents that you need. Notate the names. Listen to the rumors and the gossip. There's always an element of truth. The historical facts, it will help to prove or disprove your history. I started out trying to disprove the oral family history. Send the internet queries to the cities, county, and state of your families. Reach out to others who are searching the same people. If they say don't bother them, respect their wishes. If you can help them, just go ahead. If possible, go to the place and cemeteries of your ancestor. Always verify, recheck your sources, and make the corrections. Then cross-reference what you have. You can verify the slave owner's actual name of your family. It wasn't that many people moving back at that time, and there wasn't that many people in the city. Research the slave owner's assets and their wills and their loans. The property conveyance records, I was shocked to discover the slaves were listed in property and conveyance records when they were bought and sold. In the census record, it's only a vowel. Don't let the misspelling trip you up and anything else. Cite your sources always. And this is my book. It's available at Amazon.com, or for an autograph book, it's blueeclipsepublishing.com. Thank you very much for allowing me to share. And I hope I've taught someone something.
Denise, what questions do people have?
Let's see.
I would love to know how you figured out that slaves were used as collateral for loans. I personally had never heard that. So that was really cool. Where did you learn that?
I'm from another genealogist, and they were talking about it, and I was like, what do you mean? And when she told me, and I thought, let me run over to the Family History Center, and I ordered them, and I was shocked to see how many slaves Henry Hunt sold, because he was the sheriff of Amite County. So he knew what everybody had, and he knew what he wanted. You know, it wasn't hard to figure him out just from the information that I found, but it's so cool. It's, it causes emotions and things nowadays, but it's just so relevant to help you find your family. Who did they go to? Research that person. Who bought them? Okay, anyone else?
Denise, can you talk a little bit about where you went to research? I mean, you talked about the sources, and obviously you used online sources, but can you talk a little bit more about what other places did you go?
Well, once I originally started this, I didn't even have a computer. And they were just, really coming out with personal computers.
Mm.
And so finally, I actually talked to my mom into getting one. And all I did was typed in Deck Hunt. I knew more about him than the rest of the people. And sure enough, the 1890 census popped up showing that he was in the colored troops and had applied for a pension. And then I saw Peter Hunt and I was like, well, okay, is this the same Peter? And so that gave me some information. Deck never entered the war. Someone was trying to use his name to get a pension. So then at that time, I had to go to Mississippi. So anytime there was a chance to go to Mississippi, like once a year, I would go. And then I would go to the courthouses. Some of them weren't the most friendly. And so, my mother would always go with me, but she was like terrified. So I was like, oh, okay, I've got to figure my way out of this situation. Then I've walked many cemeteries in Mississippi. I've fallen in several cemeteries. I'm still here. No jinx. And libraries, little town Meadville. I mean, if it would take 2 minutes to drive through it, but I did go to the courthouse. We still pay the taxes on the land that came down through my grandpa and my mother. Oh. So, at one point, my sister and I, by the way, I have an identical twin sister. Okay. She and I decided, let's do a search, a land search, a property search, and see who owned that land and what happened. Even in the courthouse in Meadville, I found several deeds that where another great grandfather, Deck Hunt, he bought a lot of property. He sold a lot of property. He didn't do the homestead. And they said that the oral family history was that he paid $300 in gold. And it's like, yeah, really? Where'd that come from? And they were very prosperous. Someone burned down their house because they had quite a bit of stuff in rural Mississippi. So my grandpa, he told us about that. When I was about 13 or 14, my great grandmother died, Grandma Eula. And my grandfather, he was really upset, and it was the summer, we happened to be there. And his sister called back later on and she said, should we put her father's name on the death certificate? Because you just didn't do that, especially if he was white. And she was born like in the late 1800s, 1870, something like that. And I told my grandpa, and I just said, Grandpa, why wouldn't you put her father's name? Somebody might be looking for him years later. And it was her daddy. I mean, I was just I'm a daddy's girl. And so, a lot of it was just legwork. I didn't have the opportunity to go through Ancestry.com. Actually, I'd never heard of it until someone else told me about it. So traveling, we had to do a lot of traveling. I bought a bunch of the phone cards, long distance phone cards when they were out, and I would send them to all the older relatives and say, call anybody you want to, but when I call you, I need you to answer a question. And it worked. So,
nice. So a lot of those techniques we used to use before we had so much online.
Right.
So we have a unique opportunity because we've got Denise, who's done some great research, and we have Tom Reed from Family Search in the room. So I wonder, Tom, if I could put you on the spot and have you show yourself and unmute your mic, and maybe you could talk about some of the African-American records available on Family Search, like the Freedmen's Bureau.
That'd be so exciting.
So what do you think, Tom? Maybe he stepped away.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here, let me do this.
He said he was on the phone.
Oh, he's on the phone. Okay, so we'll keep talking until he can get off the phone. He's multitasking.
We'll keep waiting for you, Tom.
All right, so while we're waiting, any questions for Denise that you would like to ask? She can talk about the research. She can also talk about writing a book about her ancestors' life. So that's equally important.
One of the things about writing a book about an ancestor is that you have to make it something that someone else wants to read. And
Right.
that's a hard thing to do. And I think it's important too that you wanted to be true to who it was about. So you
Right.
used the photo on the cover. I think that was important. But then designing a cover around that. I'm going to stop because Tom is on camera. Go, Tom.
Unmute yourself first. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me just fine?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Tom.
You caught me. I apologize. I was at a late lunch, and so I joined a little bit later, and then I was only on my phone, and it was not letting me unmute or do anything else. So, but now I'm back in my office. So
Great.
So thank you, Denise. I'm so happy that I caught the notification that I got that this was happening, but I got to go back and see the beginning. I just saw the end, and you had mentioned something about the U.S. colored troops and being able to see Peter Hunt on the memorial there and things like that. And I have to tell you, one of the exciting things we're hoping to work on, and we're doing new at Family Search, is we're calling it historic places, to where individuals can go to a museum or to a site of remembrance of their ancestors and scan a QR code and be able to see more information about individuals that are in the Family Search family tree that are also memorialized there. We've done it so far in Utah. This is the place, Heritage Park, but my colleagues are hoping this Thursday, tomorrow, to meet with Frank Smith and Don Cheedy and James Morgan in DC to talk about how we might be able to put that forth for our U.S. colored troop heroes and do that. I know they've got lots of family trees for individuals that are in, that are memorialized there and things like that. And David Rencher, our chief genealogical officer, was sitting next to Colin Powell and Frank Smith when that happened back then. So these are, you asked like what records are available, and I'd love to be able to share a whole bunch more. There are Freedmen's Bureau records, like you said, but we've also added more to our Family Search family tree from like the 1910 U.S. Census. What we found is the 1910 U.S. Census serves as kind of a bridge between what we call living memory and historical records. And so like my ancestors, my grandparents were born past 1910. So to be able to know that my great-grandparents are listed in the Family Search family tree, tied to the U.S. Census, and documented in our Family Search family tree as African-American, then allows me to make kind of those jumps with people I didn't necessarily know in my family history. And so we've actually moved. It was about 2 years ago, we started this effort to add to the Family Search family tree, not historical records. We have the historical records, from the Freedmen's Bureau, almost 3.5 million records there, and Freedmen's Bank. But in our actual family tree, and individuals who are connected in families, and we hope that will allow people to kind of build and add to their own family tree by connecting to that family tree and be able to go back into the period of enslavement. And so that we moved from about 4.8% of all African Americans living in 1910 that were enumerated in the census back in 2019 were in the Family Search family tree. Thanks to a partnership with BYU Record Linking Lab, that number is now 99.7% of African Americans enumerated in the 1910 census are in Family Search in the family tree. A lot of the things that I'm working on are more kind of long-term, down the road type of things. And so I don't have like a whole, we just released this new thing, but maybe you saw a few months back on PBS, they had a documentary, and in that documentary, they showed how actually one of my colleagues used the Virginia Slave Birth Index to be able to document the relationship and their enslaver in Virginia. And that was like the goal. I mean, all of us at Family Search were excited because they showed literally her searching the Virginia Slave Birth Index, which is only available on Family Search. A lot of the records we share with our friends at Ancestry, and we love them and are grateful for the work that they're doing to make more records for African Americans available. But we're doing the same at the same time. And so that's just kind of one example of what we've been doing and some of the things I've been up to here lately. And Denise, you sent me an email a while back that I'm still working on the response to, and we won't talk about it here, but know that I'm talking to your people, Bruce Anderson and others in California, to get you a fair response.
Good, thank you. I know Family Search was just invaluable for me in the beginning, especially Dr. Holland here in Sacramento, and he's just still the kindest man that I know of. And he also helped to begin the yearly seminar here for African American research. And I've taught it at the seminar. I've also taught it at churches and schools and libraries. So there's a lot of information. And as I get it, I share it. I tell people where I got it from. I tell people, don't be stingy with what you have. It doesn't matter if your ancestor was white, black, Australian, Canadian, or whatever. That's your family. The slave owner was my third great grandfather. So how can I go hating on him? I might not have liked some of the things he did, but that was him. He was a spoiled brat, the only son. So, in the 1800s, whatever men did, that was law. He was married at least 4 or 5 times, as well as having children by slave women. And even his own son tried to kill him. I found that out too. So, as you're sharing with others, it helps you more than anything. So, yes, and Dr. Smith, he's also helping our Natchez U.S. Colored Troops. We're the memorial that's going to be put up in Natchez. And we've already selected the site, and we just selected the sculptor, and he's wonderful. And they're going to list by name everyone who served in Natchez on the U.S. Colored Troops. Big memorial is going to be educational. We're going to talk about the whole man, not just names on the wall, who homesteaded, who began a church, who started a school. We want to talk about the whole man. Even my cousins in Mississippi. So some of this is totally new to them. Even Peter Hunt's great-great-grandchildren, they didn't know anything about him, and they live on the property. I guess they just thought it came down through their mother or their grandfather. And so the day I called one lady, because someone kept saying, I know you guys have to be related. I said, hi, told her who I was. I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm reading your book. I said, oh, that's nice. And I said, well, Andrew said we're related, and I'm just trying to figure out who. And so when she told me her grandmother's name, I was like, oh, okay. But when she said her father's name and that he was named after his grandfather, I just said, let me call you back in 5 minutes. I just was shaking. And sure enough, her grandfather was Albert Hunt, the son of Peter Hunt. And so I called her back and I said, you still have the book? She said, yeah. I said, look at the picture on the front. She goes, yeah, okay, big deal. I said, that's your great-great-grandfather. And she was like, she got really quiet. And then all of a sudden she just yelled, I'm gonna tell my mama. And of course we started screaming and crying. And so it's in that instance, finding them, then finding his third great grandson. I've never met these people, but I was able to share their family history. So now our family has, in Mississippi, they have a website. So whenever I find anything out, I always post it on that website for them. So, and I tell them, I'm trying to get them to go to the family search centers in Mississippi. They're kind of reluctant. They said, look, cousin, we live here. You don't. You can go home. We have to stay. So don't come down here stirring up stuff. And I'm like, okay. So, I mean, it's really wonderful that we're all working together to find this out. And our research doesn't just help African Americans, it helps Caucasians and Mexicans and Indians, whoever we're related to. So that's the benefit. We're, telling the truth of everything, not just something made up. Because high school history was just, I refused to participate. I was like, look, I'll take the test, I'll do the other stuff, but I don't want to hear it. You can't tell me all my ancestors did was chop cotton, get beaten, get raped. You cannot tell me that. but that was in the 60s. So, hey.
I think it's really important to go into the study of genealogy to realize that you're preserving the past, and you're giving the people today a sense of belonging, and you're giving hope to the future generations, and you're connecting them to their past generations. I think the study of genealogy is crucial because it does give us heroes to connect to say we can within ourselves overcome because of what our ancestors overcame. Whether it was going across, leaving everything behind and going across the ocean in coffin ships, whether it was being enslaved, being institutionalized for various reasons, those things that all those people overcame, the pioneers, those people that came out and overcame fear and just complete and utter difficulty everywhere they went. Those are amazing heroic tales. But the tales of those that are cautionary, those that have been our black sheep, been our difficult people in our families, are also worth knowing. And if we don't know those stories, we're doomed to repeat them. If we know the stories of those who have gone before that are heroic, we're inspired by them. If we know those who are the cautionary tales, then we know how to avoid that difficulty or to teach into our children not to do those same things. So genealogy and the study of genealogy is crucial for a sense of connectivity, belonging, and for our future generations. And I just want to thank both of you for being here with us, because this is so important. And Denise, when I met you at the NGS conference, I knew immediately I wanted to bring what you had to our students here. So thank you for coming. And thank you so much, Tom, for coming and sharing with us. We love Family Search and we love being a part of it. And if y'all don't know who I am, I'm Angela Breitenbach. I'm the new executive director at the National Institute for Genealogical Studies. And one of our big things here is to continue to educate genealogists into the future. The beautiful thing you can do is take classes here. We have classes that touch on a lot of the elements that Denise has presented here today. You can do researching African-American ancestors. You can do an American certificate, a Canadian certificate. Both of those are going to touch on a lot of the records that Denise and Tom have talked about. And we just can't thank you enough for being here with us. We're going to share this video wide because we're so proud of what you are able to achieve and what you both have been able to speak into our student body. We're going to share it on YouTube so that we can promote you, your Family Search, Denise Griggs, and your book about your great uncle and your family, all the things that you achieved. It was just thank you for being a part of our lives and a part of our education system.
Thank you too. And the only thing I wanted to add was in my book, I wrote it as though Peter Hunt was talking, not me. And it starts out and he talks about his feelings about being able to pass, not wanting to pass, wanting to join the service. As a mulatto man, he was getting it from both sides, you know. And so the decisions he had to make, how he felt about making those decisions and what he was doing with his life. So he tells the story. I don't. By all the documents that I found, it was not easy, but it was very like life affirming that this is what he felt because he put it down on paper, how he felt. The fact that he could read and write, all those things as a former slave, and then to come out as a hero and a landowner and a voter. He voted, him and Deck, my other great-grandfather, voted in 1867 when they originally had the chance. And so many Black men were in office. So, you know, like I said, with that Natchez troop, we're bringing together the whole man. I had a distant cousin tell me, he said, Denise, he says, you have no idea. I feel like a whole and complete man now because I know my past that my parents wouldn't talk about. And so
I think that's amazing.
It's wonderful. And then to know that his grandpa homesteaded, he had no clue. So anyway, thank you everyone so much. I love talking genealogy, as you can tell.
Thank you for
thank
being
you,
with
Tom,
us.
for everything. Yes. You've been
Yeah.
a great help, even though we don't see you all the time. We know you're in the background working.
I have to note that Gina has posted Denise's link to Denise's book in the chat. And if you don't know how to do that, just go down to the bottom of your screen and you can pop out the chat and you can see it. You can click through or you can copy it. And Tom says he may have bought the second to the last copy of Denise's book. So if you want a copy, go there now.
It said there was 2 in stock, and I bought one just now, and now it says only 1 left in stock.
Thank
More
you.
on the way. So.
Oh, I need to change that. I have
Yeah,
more.
you need to send a few more copies in. And if you do need to find out how to contact Denise, what is your website?
It's for this one, it's www.blue-eclipse-publishing.com.
Okay, and I see Gina's going to put that over in the chat. And Tom, would you mind sharing with us, in case someone out there in the big wide world doesn't know how to find your website? Will you share it with us? Oh, and you are on mute.
I was on mute. Being respected. You can go to familysearch.org. That's FAMILYSEARCH. Familysearch.org.
Thank you so much. We're going to break into discussion groups for students as you would like. And if you are happy and you don't have any questions and you don't want to mix and mingle, the recording is going to be turned off now. Thank you. You can find us at genealogicalstudies.com.